Alright, we got cut off there. But according to feedingamerica.org, in 2014, 46.7 million people in the United States were in poverty, and this is including 15.5 million children. 15.3 million children are living in food insecure households, and households with children had a higher rate of food insecurity than the national average, and this included homes especially that were headed by single women. 20% or more of the child population lived in food insecure houses in 2013. So, according to research and articles that I found, there's a pretty strong correlation between poverty, young mothers, young women, and insecure attachment. I'm contributing a large piece of this to education. The United States has a pretty high rate of teen pregnancies, which research also correlated these teen pregnancies to insecure attachments. One of the reasons for these insecure attachments is atypical behavior patterns. And these behavioral patterns include withdrawal, which could be physical distance. So putting an infant in their crib when it's not time for them to sleep just because you had to do something else and you couldn't be physically present to supervise the infant. Fearful behaviors like a high-pitched voice or yelling or sudden mood changes. Another type is role confusion. So this isn't super pertinent to infants because they really wouldn't understand, but pleading with a child or threatening to cry if they don't do what you want, things like that. And effective communication errors, so really contradictory signals, saying one thing but doing another. And then intrusiveness and negativity, so mocking or teasing or withholding a toy or food or a bottle from an infant. These are all, atypical behaviors that would really result in an insecure and mistrusting relationship between the infant and the caretaker. So if we think of, the impacts poverty has on, infant development, specifically infant attachment to their caregiver, if you think nutritionally, like we talked about with Freud's, first stage of oral, his oral stage, where, if those needs and pleasures aren't met, then they're going to become fixated and start to use this defense mechanism. So if these children aren't being, fed or nourished, like we saw in the statistics, it's a very high percentage of these children, nutritional needs are not being met. They're living in food insecure houses. So, that's definitely going to play a role in attachment. Another impact that it's going to play is safety. If you think about, the poverty, you think about the living situations. Maybe they're not in a safe crib. Maybe they're sleeping in bed with, their caretaker. Maybe they're not, not dressed in appropriate clothing for appropriate weather, so they're getting sick more often. Basically, their socioeconomic status is affecting their ability to thrive and their ability for their needs to be met, and their needs need to be met in order for them to trust their caregiver. So it's kind of just a cycle. Relationships, that's the big one. Attachment is not going to happen if the infant's needs are not met, if the caregiver is not being responsive to the infant's cues. Then relationships are definitely going to take a sacrificial hit there. Stability. This is another thing that plays a really big part, and we'll see in future research as well that the lack of stability causes a reason for mistrust and for not feeling safe and secure and trusting your caregiver. So some research that I found from Hansen, Hare, Shen, Shi, and Gilmore, Wolf, and Pollack was that more than 20% of children are living in the United States in households with incomes well below the poverty line. And that's only what's been reported, so I'm sure that that number is significantly higher than what, what's in publication, which is unfortunate. They also explained that less cognitive stimulation and enrichment is a common result of living in poverty, as low-income parents tend to speak less often to their children, and are less likely to engage, their infants. So, that's, another correlation between the poverty and what type of, impact that is playing on attachment and bonding. There's also a really strong link between stability and low income status, and this correlates with, an increased amount of negative life events where the individual responds to an insecure, dismissing manner. So, these negative life events are a lot more, prevalent when someone's living in, the poverty level, and it becomes, almost second nature to respond, in this kind of insecure, dismissing manner, not in a, secure, attached manner. And that's, definitely a concern. So this is a quote that I found in one of the articles that I read that I thought, was really interesting, and kind of a twist on this. Throughout it, we're looking at all the negative effects of, of poverty and how that is affecting attachment for these, infants and children, and how it's going to affect them long term. But I found this quote, and I think it's, an interesting twist and a perspective that we as future social workers could, use, as a virtue of hope. And the quote reads, "Although attachment is considered to be a fairly stable cognitive structure, it may change over time. People can earn attachment security by experiencing later supportive relationships. They can also reinterpret their childhood experiences with their parents. Even people who have suffered harsh experiences such as childhood abuse and neglect can achieve secure attachment if they can recognize why their parents might have maltreated them and how the experiences affected and continues to affect them, and what has helped them to overcome these harsh early experiences." So I think that's really key for us to keep in mind as future social workers, that, we have the ability to create, or not to create, but to help identify, what might have happened in a client's history or past that has, led them to continuously have insecure relationships, and help them understand that and identify that in order to help them, earn that secure attachment. So in conclusion, I have a few thoughts that I just wanted to leave with you, just some open-ended things that I think kind of are, all-encompassing of what we talked about and can help you, just for ongoing thinking about this topic. With the rates of teen pregnancies so high, how can we as future social workers work to, better support them and educate them and be role models for them so that they can see how important, attachment is for their infants, and how, from a very early age, we saw, in that breakdown of how, attachment is formed and at what months, it's really crucial to be able to teach, everyone of any age, but especially these, these young mothers, the importance of these things and the importance of, making sure they have support in place to help them and things of that nature. So, I just thought that was an important thing to think about as future social workers, is, how can we support this population that's in need, and that is showing, to be a higher risk of, poverty, and that alone plays a huge part in attachment. And another thought that I had was, as we're working with clients who are having trouble securing these secure attached relationships, how can we look at their past and help them, change the pattern or break a cycle? Because as I, read in that quote just a minute ago, it is possible to break that cycle of not being able to be in a secure attached relationship. It is possible to break that once you understand your history and your past, and you're able to, overcome those early experiences. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation, and I want to thank you for your time and for watching. Alright, thanks.